what if the cure for, your chronic physical tension or even just your everyday cognitive fatigue isn't some new supplement or an injection, but actually staring at an 1872 oil painting by Claude Monet?
I mean, it sounds completely absurd when you put it like that.
It really does. But clinical trials are currently using 19th century Impressionist art combined with modern AI to literally hack the human nervous system.
Yeah, and it completely flips our standard medical paradigm. I mean, we're just so used to, very quantitative sterile interventions.
Right, totally.
But what we're looking at today bridges this massive gap between a purely subjective aesthetic experience and hard biological data.
And that is exactly what we are exploring in today's deep dive. We have this really fascinating stack of source materials.
Really fascinating.
Yeah, clinical presentations and program documents that detail a 15-day protocol. It was developed by Dr. Christophe Delong and an organization called Kinexa. And our mission today is to figure out how exactly they are merging this classic Impressionist art with modern artificial intelligence to measure, analyze, and optimize human movement and neurobiology. They actually call it visual biohacking.
Visual biohacking, yeah. And the core concept driving Dr. Delong and Kinexa is just a major paradigm shift.
No, absolutely.
Their whole premise is that the Impressionists didn't actually paint objects. Like, they didn't paint a boat or a bridge.
Right, they painted something else.
Exactly. They painted the brain's raw reaction to light. So they were unknowingly documenting these deep neurological processes decades before neurology even existed as a modern science.
That is just wild to think about.
It is. And what Kinexa has done is take that, artistic intuition and translate it into actionable clinical data.
By using 5 master painters as these sort of structural pillars, right?
Yes. To rebuild human recovery, movement, and perception. It's not just an art history lesson for you. It's a quantified medical protocol.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand how radical this is, we need to map this protocol onto a typical human day, starting right at the exact moment you wake up.
Waking up is actually the perfect starting point. The Kinexa protocol treats waking up not just as this mechanical action like opening your eyes.
Right, like a switch flipping.
Yeah, not a switch. It treats it as a highly vulnerable neurological event. And to guide this event, they use Claude Monet's 1872 piece, Impression, Sunrise, or Impression, Soleil Levant.
Which is the painting that actually gave the whole Impressionist movement its name, right?
That's the one, yeah.
Because when you look at it, I mean, it's just these loose brushstrokes, a glowing orange sun, some bluish-gray fog, barely the suggestion of some rowboats in the water.
Barely any structure at all.
So what is the biological connection here? I mean, when I open my eyes in the morning, am I essentially seeing a Monet for a fraction of a second?
You absolutely are. Monet basically captured the exact neurological phenomenon of the first 50 milliseconds of waking consciousness.
Wait, 50 milliseconds?
Yeah.
That fast?
That fast. When you first open your eyes, before conscious thought or, object recognition even kicks in, your brain is just flooded with raw visual signals.
Okay.
Your primary visual cortex, which is called V1, it only processes raw color and light intensity, just chromatic spots.
So it's literally just the orange and the blue-gray data hitting the visual cortex.
Exactly.
It's kind of like a computer booting up or, a camera lens that's totally out of focus, just registering that light exists before the processor figures out what the light is actually bouncing off of.
That is precisely it. And after that initial V1 flash, you have secondary visual areas like V2 and V4.
Right.
And they scramble to assemble contours and edges from those raw chromatic spots. And finally, there's this midbrain structure called the colliculus superior, and it engages to stabilize the entire signal.
Okay, so the colliculus superior is the stabilizer.
Yes. That is the exact moment those blurry shapes solidify into your bedroom window or your alarm clock. And Monet painted that pre-conscious 50-millisecond boot sequence. He captured the raw signal before the colliculus superior could lock it down.
He painted the neurological lag time. I mean, that is just brilliant. But how does Kinexa translate a 19th century painting of lag time into a modern clinical protocol?
Well, they use AI to measure what they call the useful motor signal.
The useful motor signal.
Right. So just as Monet filtered out the sharp, unnecessary details of the harbor to isolate just the essential vibration of light, Kinexa uses high frame rate computer vision.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and eye-tracking algorithms to filter out biological noise in a patient's movement. They track saccadic eye movements and pupillary responses to see just how quickly and efficiently a patient's brain stabilizes that visual field.
So by understanding that boot sequence, they can figure out what's going wrong?
Exactly. They can isolate the pure therapeutic gestures a patient needs to make without all the interference of kinetic compensation.
And the sources actually detail the specific day one morning protocol that Dr. DeLong designed to optimize this.
Yeah, it's very specific.
And you are supposed to do this before looking at a phone or, any high contrast screen. You wake up and you execute 3 steps.
Right. Before the phone is key.
First, 3 slow, deep breaths to force parasympathetic activation. Second, conscious axial alignment, which basically means straightening the spine to signal structural stability to the nervous system.
Right. Telling the brain the body is stable.
And third, you fix your gaze on a distant horizontal point for 30 seconds.
And that third step, that is the primary intervention.
How so?
Well, by staring at a distant horizontal line, you actively engage your peripheral vision. And that instantly forces a drop in the extraocular muscular tension that builds up during REM sleep.
Oh, I didn't even think about eye tension from sleeping.
Oh, yeah, it accumulates all night. So you are essentially giving your colliculus superior a clean, simplified target to help it lock in and stabilize your visual field.
Setting a baseline for the day.
Exactly, setting a calibrated baseline for your motor functions for the rest of the day.
But I have to push back a little here. Why the distant horizon? Like, if the goal is just to stabilize the visual field, couldn't I just stare at the wall 3 feet in front of me? Doesn't the colliculus superior stabilize no matter what I'm looking at?
It does stabilize, but proximity matters immensely here.
Okay, why?
When you look at a wall 3 feet away, your eyes are forced into convergence and accommodation. The ciliary muscles actually have to contract to focus close up.
Right, they have to work for it.
Exactly, and that requires immediate metabolic effort. But by looking at a distant horizon, you hit optical infinity.
Optical infinity.
Yeah, the lenses in your eyes flatten completely. It requires zero muscular effort, which allows the neurological stabilization to happen without prematurely taxing the oculomotor system.
So it's about establishing the signal without spending any metabolic currency right out of the gate.
Precisely.
But, eventually that visual stabilization has to translate into kinetic navigation. Once the brain maps the room, the body has to actually move through it without bleeding kinetic energy.
Right, you have to get out of bed eventually.
Exactly. That requires mechanical architecture, which brings us to the second phase of the protocol and the work of Christophe Delong.
What's fascinating here is how the Kinexa protocol transitions from that internal neurological beat sequence we just talked about to the external biomechanical reality of the body under load.
Right, dealing with gravity and effort.
And they anchor this phase on Caillebott's 1875 painting, The Floor Scrapers, Les Rabatteurs de Parquet.
It's an incredibly grounded depiction. I mean, it's just 3 men on their hands and knees stripping a wooden floor.
It is, but it's highly geometric.
Yeah, you can literally see the architecture of human tension in their shoulders and their backs.
Because Caillebott inadvertently created this perfect biomechanical map of the posterior kinetic chain.
Wow.
If you analyze the painting, you see the exact geometry of human effort. You see the required lumbar flexion, the rigid extension of the arms, the precise transfer of body mass from the core straight down to the hands.
And Kinexa uses this.
Yes. Kinexa's AI utilizes skeletal mapping and computer vision to analyze these specific chains of movement in their patients. They evaluate muscular symmetry, joint angles, and the precision of technical gestures.
Against the painting.
Gets the idealized biomechanical blueprints that they derive from these visual studies, yeah.
So they use Caillebott's anatomical precision as a baseline metric for kinetic efficiency.
Exactly.
But, Caillebott didn't just paint indoor labor. The Kinexa documents also heavily reference his urban landscapes.
The Parisian scenes.
Right, specifically Le Pont de l'Europe and Vie de Trois, his snowy Parisian rooftops. And this is where the protocol just gets wild to me.
It's a huge leap, for sure.
They argue that looking at these rigid urban environments actually alters your cognitive focus and your physical posture.
Yeah, we were talking about the concept of attention rails.
The tension rails.
Right. When you navigate a heavily structured urban environment, you are basically inundated with strong geometric lines, vanishing points, rigid, perpendicular angles everywhere.
Sure, buildings, streets, bridges.
Neurologically, these architectural structures act as rails for your visual attention. They physically guide your gaze along predetermined vectors.
Oh, wow. So you don't even have to think about where to look.
Exactly, and that drastically reduces cognitive dispersion. Your visual cortex doesn't have to calculate where to look next. That stabilizes binocular vision and prevents early cognitive fatigue.
Okay, so it's less like a generic back brace forcing you upright and more like walking on a tightrope.
I like that.
Your brain uses the rigid vertical lines of skyscrapers or iron bridges as like visual plumb bobs, and your spine just reflexively aligns to match them to maintain your center of gravity.
That is a perfect analogy. The Kinexa protocol refers to this as the urban exoskeleton.
Urban exoskeleton? That sounds like sci-fi.
It does, but it's very real. Your body unconsciously mimics the dominant structural lines of its environment. The rigid, unforgiving geometry of the city dictates a highly conscious, mechanical, forward-moving gait.
But wait, if the city acts as an exoskeleton forcing axial alignment, what happens to someone with, say, severe scoliosis? Or even just someone with a chronic desk worker slouch?
That's the friction point.
Doesn't forcing their compromised spine to unconsciously map to a rigid vertical skyscraper cause massive friction? Like, are we forcing people into painful maladaptation?
This raises an important question, and it's exactly what Kinexa is measuring.
Oh, they track that too.
Yes, you are entirely right. If the internal structure is compromised, adapting to a rigid external geometry causes kinetic friction.
Right?
So Kinexa uses wearable accelerometers and spatial mapping to measure that exact maladaptive friction.
Incredible.
They analyze how effectively or ineffectively a patient's body absorbs and recalibrates its posture in response to rigid environments. And then the protocol uses that friction data to prescribe targeted micromovements to correct the underlying structural deficit.
So the city essentially tests the posture and the AI measures the failure points. That is fascinating.
It really is.
But, you know, a rigidly structured geometric posture isn't enough to survive a dynamic, unpredictable world.
No, you'd be way too stiff.
Right. To avoid injury, the nervous system has to learn to constantly recalibrate to moving targets, changing surfaces, and, well, other people. Which leads us to the protocol's third phase, anchored by Pierre-Auguste Renoir.
Right. Renoir introduces the biological requirement of neuroagility.
Neuroagility.
And to quantify this, Dr. Delong's protocol utilizes Renoir's 1876 piece, The Swing, La Balançoire. Beyond just the beautiful dappled light and the aesthetics, it is a total masterclass in dynamic balance.
Because when you are on a swing or even just walking on uneven ground, you are constantly managing micro-adjustments to gravity.
Precisely. You are forcing this rapid-fire communication between the cerebellum, which coordinates voluntary movement, and the vestibular system, which is in the inner ear, processing spatial orientation.
Okay.
And Kinexa tracks how quickly a patient's nervous system can execute these micro-adjustments and recover their center of mass.
So they measure the recovery time.
Yes, the speed of that recovery, that neuroagility, is a primary indicator of overall bodily resilience.
And Renoir actually expanded that dynamic balance from the individual to the collective, because the Kinexa documents highlight his massive painting, The Bal du Moulin de la Galette.
The big dance scene.
Yeah, it's this huge, vibrant outdoor dance scene packed with people moving in unison.
And they focus on this because collective movement introduces a highly complex biological regulator. Moving in a crowd isn't just a social activity. It forces profound neurobiological synchronization.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. It reminds me of watching a murmuration of starlings.
Oh, right.
You know, where thousands of birds just swoop and pivot in the sky in perfect fluid unison. They aren't actively communicating. Their nervous systems are just locked into this shared biological rhythm.
Exactly.
Are you saying humans do that too on a crowded dance floor or a busy street?
We do, absolutely. And the mechanics of it are entirely measurable. When humans engage in shared physical rhythms, it triggers intense mirror neuron activation.
Wow.
We basically unconsciously begin to match the gait, the breathing rate, and the kinetic frequency of the people around us.
But why? Like, what is the evolutionary advantage of phase locking with a crowd like that?
It comes down to energy conservation.
Really?
Yeah. When you synchronize your movements with a group, your brain's predictive coding requires significantly less computational power.
Oh, because everyone is doing the same thing.
Exactly. You don't have to constantly calculate the unpredictable variables of the people around you because you are all operating on the exact same rhythmic wavelength. It optimizes total energy expenditure.
That makes a lot of sense.
And on top of that, this shared rhythm spikes dopamine production, which rewards the brain for successfully integrating into the social matrix.
Okay, but how exactly does Kinexa's AI extract hard data from something as fluid as social synchronization?
They utilize multi-agent tracking algorithms and kinematic phase-locking metrics.
Sounds complicated.
It is, but basically by monitoring a patient interacting within a dynamic group, the AI can measure their rhythmic variability and their capacity for collective motor resonance.
So it spots the person who is out of step.
Right. If a patient is unable to synchronize, if their movements remain rigid and out of phase with the group, it indicates a severe bottleneck in their sensoromotor integration.
Okay, so let's look at where we are in the day. We've booted up the visual cortex with Monet.
Right.
We've navigated the rigid geometry of the city with Kai about.
Yep.
And we've synchronized our dynamic movements with the crowd via Renoir.
That's a full day.
Exactly. By this point, sympathetic overload is totally inevitable. The prefrontal cortex is fried, the muscles are flooded with metabolic waste, and the system just desperately needs to downshift.
And this is where Dr. DeLong's protocol introduces interventions to force the transition from sympathetic drive to parasympathetic recovery.
Right, getting out of fight or flight.
Exactly. And they circle back to Monet for this. Specifically his later massive canvases, Les Enfers, the water lilies.
Those paintings are completely immersive, and they're famously devoid of sharp lines or horizon points. It's just blurry, abstract water and green reflections.
And that deliberate lack of structure is the biohack.
Really?
Yes, the modern environment exhausts the brain through the constant demand for sharp, directed focus.
Always looking at screens, always navigating.
Right. The water lilies force a state of soft fascination.
Soft fascination.
Because there are no sharp geometric points for the eyes to fixate on, saccadic eye movements naturally slow down. You achieve total sensory immersion without any active cognitive load.
That sounds incredibly relaxing.
It is. Furthermore, the dominant green wavelengths hit the retina and act as an evolutionary safety signal. It demonstrably lowers cortisol and instantly stabilizes heart rate variability.
But practically speaking, you can't always teleport to a lush green environment when your cortisol spikes in the middle of a chaotic day.
No, unfortunately not.
Sometimes you have to force that neurological downshift right in the middle of a noisy, saturated environment, like a busy office or a crowded subway.
Which is why the protocol utilizes Edouard Manet's Un bar aux folies bergères.
Okay, the painting of the barmaid.
Right. It perfectly captures a barmaid standing in the very center of a chaotic, dazzling Parisian nightclub. But she has this incredibly detached, empty stare.
I know that exact look. It's the stare of someone who has just mentally checked out of the room to survive the sensory overload.
That empty stare is the visual marker of a highly critical neurological shift.
Okay.
When you decouple your visual attention from your environment like that, you are actively engaging the default mode network, or the DMN.
And the DMN is essentially the brain's internal maintenance mode, right?
Right.
It's the network that lights up when we stop processing external stimuli and start consolidating memories, processing emotional data, and clearing out cognitive debris.
Exactly. Monet basically documented the precise moment of DMN activation as a survival mechanism against sensory saturation.
And Kinexa measures this.
Yes. Kinexa measures a patient's capacity to access this state. They use eye tracking to monitor gaze entropy and the reduction of active visual saccades in highly stimulating environments.
So they see if you can zone out effectively.
Quantifying the patient's ability to maintain an internal center of gravity when the external world is just screaming for their attention.
Okay, so we've achieved cognitive disconnection, but there is still a physical transition required before sleep.
The physical downshift, yes.
And the protocol moves to Edgar Degas to facilitate this.
They specifically reference Degas' Femme se coiffant, depicting a woman slowly, methodically combing her hair. Degas deeply understood the biology of the evening ritual.
Like brushing your hair, washing your face, the repetitive application of lotion.
Yes, exactly. These are slow, circular, haptic repetitions.
Haptic meaning touch base.
Right. Biologically, engaging in highly predictable, low-velocity haptic feedback sends a definitive signal straight up the afferent nerve pathways to the brain.
Okay, and what does the signal say?
It confirms that the environment is secure and the necessity for defensive, sympathetic muscle tension has finally passed.
The danger is gone.
Exactly. Kinexa monitors this phase to measure the subsequent drop in global muscle tone as the patient fully commits to parasympathetic dominance.
It's basically the physical off switch, which leads us to the ultimate goal of Dr. DeLong's 15-day protocol, which is total abandonment.
The final frontier.
And for this final metric, they use Renoir's Le Sommeil, The sleep.
For Kinexa, sleep isn't just the absence of wakefulness. It is an active performance metric.
Okay, how so?
They are measuring for complete muscular release, which neurologists call the tonic discharge.
Tonic discharge.
Right. If the system does not achieve full tonic discharge, the cellular regeneration and neuroplasticity required to consolidate the day's motor learning simply won't occur.
You just don't heal.
Right. So Kinexa's AI analyzes the patient's nocturnal biometric data to verify that this deep restorative biomechanical surrender is actually achieved.
So what does this all mean? The Kinexa protocol isn't just some art appreciation exercise. They have decoded a literal aesthetic prescription for the human nervous system.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it proves that our biological data is inextricably linked to our visual environment.
Right.
You can actively leverage these mechanisms. You can seek out soft fascination and specific green wavelengths to force a drop in cortisol.
Okay.
You could utilize distance viewing to stabilize your oculomotor system before engaging with high-stress tasks.
Right, staring at the horizon.
And you can use predictable haptic routines to manually trigger parasympathetic recovery at night. The protocol proves that aesthetic input equals biological output.
It fundamentally changes how you perceive the space around you.
It really does.
And it leaves you with this incredibly provocative realization. Like, if looking at rigid architecture lines, specific color wavelengths, and geometric vanishing points can so profoundly dictate our heart rate, our spatial mapping, and our brain waves, what if the way we design our modern cities, our office buildings, and our living spaces isn't just about functionality or taste? What if our architecture is silently, relentlessly programming our daily neurobiology and our biomechanics without our consent?
It strongly suggests we are constantly passively being biohacked by our own infrastructure.
Wow.
The challenge is learning to recognize the protocol so you can actively control the inputs yourself.
Because you aren't just looking at the world is actively shaping the machinery of your mind and body. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Look at the world a little closer tomorrow morning.